Hi there. All right, my name's Bruce, and welcome to my channel where I talk about stuff. I like to, sometimes I talk about a thing, sometimes I talk about a person, and sometimes, well, I just talk about ideas. And if you recall, a lot of this stuff's about economics, and that's fine. Now, when I was a kid, there was a person that I heard about. My dad had a book. I read it. It's called Clarence Darrow for the Defense. Clarence Darrow for the Defense. So Clarence Darrow in the 20s or 30s or whenever it was, he was a pretty progressive, wise guy. He was a lawyer. And I think he went on, he became a Supreme Court justice, but I'm going to look that up, and I might be wrong. I don't know, but that's fine. But today I'm talking again about the Supreme Court of the United States. Okay, the Supreme Court of the United States. Past couple days they did three things, and we're facing the reverberation of a presidency that was not necessarily the greatest, in spite of self-assertions to the contrary. Okay, but what thing this person did was they managed to get a few justices onto the Supreme Court. And moreover, before that, there was a guy named, I think his name's Mitch McConnell. So Mitch McConnell, he was the leader of the GOP in the Senate, and he managed to subvert or obstruct a Supreme Court nominee from President number 44. And that kind of left a gap. That gap was filled by President number 45. So the Supreme Court of the United States, okay, so COTUS, okay. That. Now you might be thinking, why am I talking about this? What effect does it have on my life? Well, the reality is that the United States is a very significant nation in the world. You might say it's a superpower. At one point, that was a term that was used, but the United States is a big deal. And the United States has great influence over the planet, and that influence at one time. I remember when I was a kid, I'd be reading books, and our textbooks. A lot of times, the reader that you get in grade school would come from the United States, and it'd have stories that were sort of centered in the United States. This is in like 1970. And so I remember one story was about hunting a whale. That was not necessarily the best story. Another story was about the Macy's Thanksgiving Day parade with all the balloons and such. And I'll tell you, if you're 6 years old, you think that is just that's the bee's knees. That's Cadillac. That fills your imagination with something that you're interested in and want. The United States. It's amazing. So that's, and there's many. I've actually been personally. I've been to 48 of the 50 United States I've visited. Okay, and I've met people from 50 of the 50 United States, and we've had wonderful, in-depth conversations. And I count many of them people amongst my friends, and I have many relatives that live in the United States, and they're great people. And geez, the U.S. is the U.S. is the U.S. Heck, there's a reason why people walk around the streets wearing T-shirts that say USA. I mean, if you're in small town, any country in the world, you're going to probably maybe encounter someone with such a T-shirt. It's a big deal. Okay. Anyway, on that, the Supreme Court of the United States, they did a couple things. One thing they did was they said that the concept of affirmative action, they said no. Okay, and that's a mistake, and it affects a lot of people in a really negative way. And if you're interested in a little bit more my views on that or general discussion, it's on that item as an earlier video made about that. Okay. But in summary, the Supreme Court of the United States, the jurors that were nominated and put in effect by the pretty hard right extreme ends of the GOP, they said that their version of fair and the fair version of fair are not necessarily coincident. Okay, I go on that a bit at length. Another thing that happened is, they said that it's okay for someone to refuse service on the basis of, to discriminate on the basis of sexual orientation, which is what's happening. And that was previously, that was, to my mind, that simply should not occur. But anyway, the United States Supreme Court said, go ahead, discriminate away. That's what it said. Now the other thing is this, and all of these things are related to economics, believe it or not. Okay, because if you've been following these videos, I talk about the roles of the government, the roles of the individual, the roles of businesses. Okay, and then businesses want to make money. It's their unabashed purpose on the planet. That's it. Okay, great. Go ahead. Do your darndest and reap your profit. That's a positive thing. It is. It's great. A lot of great stuff comes of that. Now, the government's role is to maximize the well-being of everyone. That is the role of government. I've said this before. The role of the individual is to be happy. Focus on your happiness. Maximize your utility. I think that's that's what it says in the textbook. Your utility being the enjoyment, your enrichment, your leisure time, your time spent with family, your capacity to have shelter, your capacity to have food, capacity to have recreation, all this stuff. This is important. Okay. Now, of the Supreme Court of the United States. Now, so they said, go ahead. Go ahead. Don't bake that cake. Don't make that website. You know, if the person that's coming to you, the business, for a service, and you don't agree with their with who they are, then the Supreme Court of the United States says, okay, we're going to permit this, which is, it's straight up discrimination. Okay, next one is, if you've been following, you'll know that I've said something about money. I've said something about government. I've said something about government expenditure, and I pointed out that a government and a progressive government. Progressive meaning they have progressive taxation. A federal government is a progressive government to a certain extent, as a provincial government or a state government is a progressive government. A civic government in Canada doesn't really meet this definition of progressive. But there you go. They said they don't really, what they spend, their expenditure is not money. Okay. Not in the same sense that your household budget is money, and they're very different. Okay, and I've tried to explain this, and maybe if you follow along, you get it, and if you follow along, you don't get it, I'm sorry, I got to do a better job. And if you haven't been following along, you might want to go back. But anyway, on this, so I talk about this. Say this. This thing, it's a production possibility curve. I talked about it a zillion times. And it's the role of government is to do things that are going to sort of advance this outward. This is the suite of all the combinations of goods and services that can be created within our economy. All right. Now, and it's the government's job is to maximize the well-being of everyone. Now, if the government took an incorrect view and thought that their important role in life is to not spend, to not do anything, then what happens is you have horribleness, right? And an example of that is in the 1930s, the 1920s, United States. Horribleness. The Great Depression came from that. And the recovery from the Great Depression is due in a couple of things. But at the root of it is because FDR realized that I'm sure he had a lot of advisors, but it's like the only thing we have to fear is fear ourselves, and we have a responsibility to get on with it, and to live our lives, and to do things, and employ people. And this happened in Canada, actually, in 1993 also. I mean, there was an upswing in government expenditure, and the benefits of it were massive. Okay, so anyway, the President, Joseph Biden, said that we're going to do, by fiat, by decree, by executive order, we're going to forgive student loans. Okay, now, if you're going to school and you're You're going to pay your tuition, you're going to pay your living expenses, you're going to pay for your books, you're going to pay for your extra tuition, you're going to pay your stuff, right? So maybe if your family's incredibly wealthy, then you're going to pay it that way. If your family's not incredibly wealthy, maybe you're going to get a job, you're going to save up, you're going to pay it, do all these things. But one thing that you're going to do maybe is you're going to borrow. You're going to have things called student loans, okay? So now, if you consider the education, right? So this is I'll try to something this in here, this box. This is the cost of a person going to school, say in Canada or in the United States or in Israel and Portugal or somewhere. It doesn't matter. Okay, so in Canada, the government in most cases, our public resources are going to contribute like this, okay? And then just to kind of pretend, then we're going to say that the students are going to pay this little bit up here, all right? Now, depending upon where you're going to school and the school that you're taking, this idea is going to shift around. Okay, maybe if you're attending a school, then maybe the public resources are going to pay like a little bit. You're going to pay a whole bunch like this. All right, but in Canada, access to education exists. Okay, so if you're a person of a reasonable means or any means at all or no means, and you have the merit, you have the desire, you have the academic credentials, which are, even that's flexible, you can pursue your career. You can advance yourself through education and you can go to school, right? It's great. Have this in Canada. United States is it's like the same affair. They have it different methods. They have different schools. They have like state schools and they have Ivy League schools. They have other schools. But in general, if you pick an arbitrary school, you'll find that a proportion of the school is paid for by the government, by the public purse, and a proportion of the school is paid for by the students, and a portion of the school is paid for by the alumni or whatever. But there you are. But a lot of people are taking student loans. So what happens in the United States, you take the aggregate, the total amount of money that's owed in student loans, and you just naively add it up. It's an enormous sum. $2 trillion, I think it's about like 1.7, but it's like $2 trillion, $2,000 billion. Now what that is what you might call a giant rock. It's a boat anchor around the neck of Americans. It's a boat anchor around the neck of the economy. It's a boat anchor that drags down innovation, and it's unfairly distributed. So if you woke up in the morning when you were born and you discovered that your parents are gajillionaires, then you can go to any school you want. We've seen examples of that where parents are engaged in a little bit of cheating to get their children into class, and there's been prosecutions on that. But if your parents are incredibly wealthy, you come from a legacy of affluence, legacy of wealth, then the financial barrier to your education is non-existent. It doesn't exist. Okay, now let's just say that you're an incredible student and you come from poverty. Well, then you've managed to, by really force of will and hard work, is you've gotten yourself to a point where you're encrusted in 360-degree scholarships and you're well rewarded. Or if you're an athlete, you're well rewarded. Or there's lots of cases where but we're talking about the top. The rich people, that's the upper 0.001% of the population, and the bottom, unfortunately, that's maybe like 5% of the population or 1% of the population. But we got about 97% of the population that's in the middle. Okay, the thing in the middle, and we have to elevate the middle, elevate people in the middle. So if I go back to this thing here, which is this economics concept of the production possibility curve, and the role of government in that is what you do. It's what do we have and what do we know? Well, we have a bunch of stuff and we know a bunch of things. And we're talking about the aggregate of society. So we want the aggregate of society to have more and know more. That's it. That's government. That's another way of maximizing the well-being of everyone. Okay, so if you have 80%, it's this giant portion in the middle that needs assistance in the form of student loans or in the form of there's a couple of different grades. It doesn't matter, but let's just call it student loans. Then the cost of the education is astronomical. Like to quote Bruce Springsteen, you're going to wind up with debts that no honest person can pay. All right, so it drags you down, it drags your family down, it drags society down. And that is the important part, is that it drags society down. It impedes our capacity to function and expand our production possibility curve. And it's a detriment to education. It's a disincentive for someone to study hard, to do well, and go to school, right? And the thing about the study hard and the do well is you don't know when that flower is going to bloom, all right? So if you have a student that's in high school and that student is, say, a B student, or they, for whatever reason, they're getting Bs, and they have personal circumstance and all that stuff, and so but they really, really want to go to school and become a material scientist, or they want to go to school and become a family physician. Okay, well, they can't. And the reason why they can't is because the grades aren't high enough in high school to warrant the scholarship at first blush, and their family's not rich enough to send them to school. That's unfortunate. And they wind up living a life that's not their best life, and society is deprived. Everyone is weakened by this loss of opportunity. Okay, so. And I said, you don't know when the flower is going to bloom. So what happens is if we magically snap our fingers, we get this person into school, then maybe halfway through their first year, goodness gracious, they find traction and they become the greatest student in the class. And by their positive influence, and they bring everyone else up to a higher level. And that happens. I've seen it, countless times. I've seen it in my own family. I've seen it in myself, for crying out loud. I've seen it in my close relatives. I've seen it in my friends. I've seen it in my friends' children. I've witnessed this in strangers. This is a thing. So you don't know when it's going to happen. So as long as someone is operating in good faith, by good faith I mean, they're getting up in the morning, they're trying their darndest, and they're coping with the things they have to cope with, and they're going to school and to class, and they're trying to better themselves, and in bettering themselves, they're going to better the entire place. So what's happened is President Biden said, you know what, that $2 trillion in student loan debt, well, we're going to forgive a whole whack of it. And some people object because they think it's somehow their money, which it's simply not. I try to explain, and I haven't been necessarily, I don't know if I'm successful in convincing people of this, but it's not money like it's like the same money that you're going to have stashed in your mattress. Is if John and Susan and Paula and Ashtif do not pay their student loan, do you know who loses? No one. If that loan is forgiven, you know who loses? No one. You know who benefits? Everyone, because that albatross is off of their back. And President Joseph Biden said, well, let's just do that. Let's on a whole bunch of criteria, let's forgive tens or hundreds of thousands of student loans and allow people to get on with their lives and allow them to contribute to society as they should. Now, the Supreme Court of the United States said President Biden has overstepped his authority there, and that is no. Oh, well, that's a big loss for everybody. I explained just now why it's a big loss for everybody. And goodness gracious, I'm crushed. I mean, I don't live in the United States. I'm crushed. I'm personally crushed at this. All right. And one thing is, if you're observing a decision and you're thinking, well, does it affect me? No. Does it help me? I can't see how it helps me, but it doesn't hurt. Does it hurt me? No. Does it hurt this other person? No. Does it hurt my family? No. Well, then let's do it, okay? And then we'll figure it out. And then here's another way, something you could do it incrementalism, little by little. You could say, well, let's do it for 100,000 people and see, does the world go to hell in a handbasket? Does our country, the United States, deteriorate? Does the world stop turning? What is going to happen? Let's try 100,000. Okay, and you say, oh wow, you know what, this is pretty good. And then maybe in next year, let's try another 200,000. Let's ramp it up. Let's make the world better, because that is a job of government. And there you go. Anyway. Thank you for joining my channel. As I said, I'm on a subscription drive. I'm hoping to get 75 subscribers. I've decided that that's my goal. So if you look down and you see the subscriber count, you might say, hey, we can help this guy, because it costs nothing to subscribe. It's free, for crying out loud. It's no skin off anybody's nose. Anyway, there you go. Okay. Enjoy your day. Think about these things, and be thoughtful. Be thoughtful in the application of your vote. Be thoughtful in the application of your influence of other people's to vote. Do your best thought. And if you totally disagree with everything that I say in this channel, then please let me know in the comments. I don't have a monopoly on good ideas, or I certainly don't have a monopoly on bad ideas. Anyway, thank you very much. Bye now. Ooh.